So Matt, are you on the call, ready to start your presentation?
Ready whenever you are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little after 9. I just wanted to give everybody another minute or two to log in and get themselves set up. I'd like to welcome all of you to day 2 of the April 2021 council meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we have a number of different items on the agenda for today. The first one is a discussion or a presentation by Matt Seeley on Blueline Tilefish specifications. And so I just want to thank everybody for their work yesterday. It didn't get too long into the day, but it was a long day. And I want to turn it over to Matt for this morning's presentation. So Matt, whenever you're ready, you're good to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to confirm, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. All right, if anything happens connection-wise, please just interrupt me at any point. But I'm excited to talk to you all about Blueline Tilefish today. So with that, I'll get going.
Matt, and I'm going to go on mute, but if anything happens, I'll switch over and let you know.
Thanks very much. So in terms of the presentation, I'll just touch on the objective, the specs process, as well as stock status and recent fishery performance, and then touch on the 3 different recommendations that came from staff, the SSC, and the monitoring committee. So the objective of this meeting is to approve specifications for up to 3 years, and that's the 2022 to 2024 fishing years. And this is taking into account previous ABCs and management measures, different factors influencing recent catch and landings, the advisory panel fishery performance report, and then other issues and concerns that have been raised throughout this process. In terms of the 2020 specifications and management measures, we're reviewing here year 3 of 3 of the 2019 to 2021 package, which included commercial trip limits of 500 pounds that are reduced to 300 pounds once 70% of the quota has been landed, and the season runs from January 1 to December 31st. Recreational trip limits or bag limits are 7 fish, 5 fish, and 3 fish for U.S. Coast Guard inspected, uninspected, and private vessels, respectively. And the season runs from May 1 to October 31st. The ABC for the 2020 fishing year was 100,520 pounds, allocated 73% to the recreational fishery and 27% to the commercial fishery. And in terms of 2020 landings, on the recreational side, in numbers of fish, we had 9,600 fish reported through the VTRs. There was nothing reported through MRIP in the 2020 fishing year. However, we did estimate private landings to be just over 3,800 fish, and this is using a Delphi approach that we've used in the past, which I'll get into later on in the presentation. And then on the commercial side, in terms of pounds, there was just over 31,000 pounds landed. Regarding stock status, the last assessment was CDAR 50, which was conducted in 2017. North and south of the stock was split into 2 different regions, north and south of Cape Hatteras. South of Cape Hatteras, the stock was deemed not overfished, with overfishing not occurring. And north of Cape Hatteras was deemed unknown, and they used a data-limited toolkit to estimate the ABCs. In regards to a data update, there was no specific information available from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. The data that would have been reported was very similar to what was available in the fishery information document. Regarding the next assessment, it's going to be conducted with the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council and obviously as well as the Southeast Fisheries Science Center through the CDAR approach again. We have a tentative research track assessment for 2024, which will be available to management most likely in 2025. And something we're hopefully looking forward to doing here is trying to sync up our specification cycles so we can have this assessment work concurrently and have our measures developed with those groups. In terms of the specifications process, again, the assessment in 2017 made no recommendations for the stock north of Cape Hatteras. And around that time, we convened a subcommittee with representation from both councils and science centers to develop ABC recommendations north of Hatteras, which our SSC has reviewed, as well as the 2021 Fishery Performance Report and Fishery Information Document to recommend those ABCs. Then the monitoring committee discussed various management measures, and now we're here today with the goal of approving the specifications package. Excuse me. So focusing now on commercial fishery performance, landings were low and stable under 30,000 pounds until 2014 and 15, when landings into New Jersey drove the initial involvement of the council into the Blueline tilefish fishery. And we did see a significant increase in landings from 2019 to 2020. Some of this can be attributed to the increase in commercial trip limit from 300 to 500 pounds. And those 2020 commercial landings were 31,270 pounds. The Blueline tilefish ex-vessel value on the left here has correlated very nicely with our landings. Outside of the spikes in 2014 and 15, the 2020 ex-vessel value is the highest in the time series, increasing by roughly $30,000 from 2019 to 2020. And in 2020, the ex-vessel value is just over $90,000. And now on the right here, we have the Blueline tilefish average price per pound, which has been steadily increasing since the early 2000s. And the 2020 price per pound was $2.88, which is up about 23 cents from 2019. Now on the left here, we're presenting the top 5 National Marine Fisheries Service statistical areas accounting for total 2020 Blueline tilefish landings, and these are identified with commercial VTRs. These statistical areas continue to be the primary locations where Bluelines are caught, and these fish are caught primarily with longline and handline gear, followed by trawls and pots and traps. And on the bottom right is the breakdown of landings in pound bins by trip. So you can see here that the increase to a 500-pound trip limit was utilized about 13 times in 2020. So now here's the current quota monitoring report for the commercial fishery. The solid red line is the quota. The dashed red line is 70% of the quota, where the trip limit should be reduced from 500 to 300 pounds. The blue line is the current year's landings, and that's obviously just under our yellow line, which represents last year's landings. And as you can see, last year, the commercial landings did exceed the commercial quota by about 16%, or as little as just over 4,000 pounds. And during 2020, GARFO did make a decision to not implement the quota trigger since we were nearing the end of the year, which would have, again, reduced that trip limit to 300 pounds. So nearing the end of the year, it looked like landings were sloping off, and then they ended up increasing a little bit again. So ultimately, this may trigger a pound-for-pound payback in the 2021 fishing year as detailed in the accountability measures. And GARFO last mentioned that they're still finishing up their catch accounting and will be notifying the council shortly of any overages. So waiting on confirmation from that. But now transitioning to the recreational fishery performance. On the left are the available MRIP catch data in numbers of fish by year, state, and mode. The data for blue lines are fairly limited, often have very high percent standard errors. But in 2019, MRIP reported just over 7,000 fish. However, there was no report in 2020 due to COVID-19 and the fact that blue line tilefish intercepts are not common through MRIP. And on the right are the available data for party charter vessels through 2020 as identified through the VTR database. In 2020, there was just over 140 trips with 9,600 fish being caught. Private catch is just starting to be reported through the VTRs, so combining our limited understanding of the private rental reports and the 2020 VTRs may provide a more accurate estimate of catch, and I'll get into detail on that in a few slides. But overall recreational fishery performance, last year the monitoring committee estimated overall performance using the VTRs for the party and charter fleets, and then used the recommendation that came out of the Delphi approach conducted in 2016. And this was to use a multiplier of 105% of the charter VTR catch to estimate private landings, since the private rental intercepts are rare occurrences through MRIP, and we didn't have any sort of private rental permitting and reporting requirements yet. So that's what you're seeing here for the private rental, the second to last column on the right there. And then ultimately to estimate pounds, and this is definitely an estimate again, staff would use a 3.65 pound multiplier as the accepted average weight. And this is what was defined in Amendment 6 to the Tilefish FMP that allowed the council management of blue line tilefish. So in terms of private recreational permitting and reporting, this was approved in Amendment 6 to the Tilefish FMP in 2017, but with delayed implementation. Now, reporting can occur through the VTRs, an app called eTrips Mobile, or the council-funded app, eFin Logbook. These requirements went live in August 2020. However, our recreational season goes only through October 31st, so you can understand that those 2020 landings are probably quite limited, given it was only about 3 months. But for 2020, during that time, about 340 permits were provided, and 8 recreational trips were reported, landing about 84 fish. So all of this information thus far was presented to the advisory panel to invoke discussion. Staff focused on the following trigger questions to try to develop the fishery performance report. I think most of you are familiar with these. What factors have influenced recent catch, markets and economy, the environment, fishery regulations, or is there anything else that's important for the council to know throughout this process? So the fishery performance report, which is developed by the Tilefish advisor, focused around the following comments, those being that there are no major changes reported for Blueline tilefish in terms of catch rates and compositions. Once Blueline tilefish limits are met, the recreational trips typically search for other targets. And when targeting other species, trip limits restrict commercial fishermen from targeting areas where blue lines are present. Many advisors also stated they prefer status quo specifications and management measures since the fishery is still new, and that recreational effort decreased this year as it does not make economic sense to target blue line tilefish when tuna are not present or are very plentiful. More comments from the advisors. From New York, Hunts Point, they were receiving approximately $2.88 per pound and occasionally as high as $4 per pound for larger fish. And advisors remain confident that there's continued demand for blue line tilefish. They advocated to maintain the 3, 5, and 7 bag limits in place since there's currently limited reporting for private anglers, and we're still learning how the fishery responds to management in the mid-Atlantic. But overall, there was some disagreement on whether the increased bag limit will have negative effects on the overall stock. And then the advisors want to avoid creating a directed fishery, especially with the uncertainty of the overall stock. So all of this information, again, was then presented to the Scientific and Statistical Committee, and council staff ultimately recommended a status quo ABC of 100,520 pounds for the 2022 to 2024 specifications package. And we took into consideration last year's recommendation, recent fishery performance, lack of an updated assessment, again, the need to streamline our specification cycle with the CDR cycle, and then the high degree of uncertainty within the recreational sector. The SSC then reviewed all of this information. The next 2 slides were provided by Dr. Paul Rago. Ultimately, the SSC found no compelling evidence from either the data update or the reports from the advisory panel to change the current ABC, but setting of the ABC generated much discussion. There's quite a few key points here that I do just want to go through individually. The current knowledge is inadequate to manage this stock on the quantitative basis desired. There's concerns about the underlying basis for the current quota being based off a data limited approach. The paucity of new information. Restrictions to the fishery would cause a major decrease in new information. Potential benefits of mandatory reporting by recreational fishermen are still to be determined. There's insufficient data to evaluate, given, again, those requirements started in August and the fishing year only went through October. Then the SSC expressed their concern that specifying the ABC for the 3-year period effectively guarantees no additional work will be focused on this species, because the data analyses and assessment evaluation is tied directly with the need to conduct an assessment to set an ABC. But then obviously, they're optimistic that we're going to continue to review this data annually during the specification period. Regarding the terms of reference, the 5 different ones used, they set the level of catch for the ABC at the staff recommendation as well of 100,520 pounds for the 2022 to 2024 fishing years based on information, some 2018 information. And they recommend annual review of the regulations, everything, all the management measures throughout the process that we would conduct every year. A variety of different sources of uncertainty were that the OFL was based on data through 2015. Private rental catch is rescaled by the Delphi method. There's uncertainty associated with model data limited approaches and the parameters associated. And then if there's any spatial expansion or fishery expansion. In terms of research and monitoring recommendations, the SSC put forward to collect biological samples from existing sources, consider prioritizing as a research track prior to 2024, contact MREP Rare Events Working Group, revisit the Delphi process, look at selectivity of the commercial fishery, and then hopefully improving age and growth information. Ultimately, in terms of the certification of best scientific information available, the SSC did agree, but as you can see, they do have their reservation. And then finally, this information was presented to the monitoring committee that went through and reviewed the entire process. Ultimately, the monitoring committee also recommended status quo management measures to go along with the status quo ABC for 2022 to 2024. However, the monitoring committee did have some additional notes related to the commercial overage. They're suggesting and recommending that the accountability measures not be triggered for a variety of reasons, those including obviously COVID-19, the fact that no reduction in trip limit occurred from 500 to 300 pounds, the fact that given the estimations we provided for the recreational sector, they most likely under-harvested, and then ultimately, there's likely minimal biological justification since the quota was so small and the overage was also quite small. And then finally, a recommendation from the monitoring committee was to have GARFO and commercial portside biological samplers work with golden tilefish vessels in the mid-Atlantic to improve overall intercepts and sampling of blueline tilefish. And with that, it concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the presentation. Let me see if anybody has any questions or wants to add. I see a few hands coming up on the screen here, so I'm going to start with Scott Lennox. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, thanks for the presentation. Back in, you were talking about recreational catch estimate. I think it was an estimate for 2020, where there were 8 trips with 84 fish caught. Is that an estimate or is that from BTRs or what? Because if I'm correct here, the highest limit that any of those recreational vessels could have had would have been 7, and the math doesn't work out quite right unless they're all catching more than their limit.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Scott. So that was, sorry, the slide changed on my end, not yours. So yeah, that was for private anglers, the 8 recreational trips that did occur. I think it was different amount of individuals that were actually on those trips. So those either the
aren't those limits aggregate though?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, those I think those limits are aggregate limits. So if there's 8 trips times a maximum of 7 fish per trip per vessel, the math doesn't add up quite right. That's why I brought the question up, just because I'm wondering if it's assumed that people are keeping more fish than they're supposed to. Thank you.
I think, within the private recreational fishery, with things being new here, this reporting system being new, there may be some discrepancies there, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks for that, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks for that, Matt. Let me go next to, I have Peter Hughes next. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I have kind of I'm glad Scott asked that question, but my question is I believe the bag limit was 7 for inspected trips, 5 and 3 for recreational. I think it was one of your first slides. And my question is this: I'm a recreational fisherman. I go out there, I catch 7 fish. What am I doing? Am I calling the Coast Guard over to inspect me, or am I running the gauntlet and hope that I get the dock, or if I get intercepted by the Coast Guard, I go, oh, good, now you're here. Would you count my fish? I don't understand how that system works.
I think I'm a little confused by your question. Thank you for asking, but in terms of, if you're 3, 5, or 7, you follow the regulations that you are, required to abide by. If you're intercepted by Coast Guard, obviously, hopefully you're abiding by the bag limit that's associated with the vessel that you're permitted to land on. Can you, I guess, clarify your question a little bit more, Peter, or just, repeat it, please?
I guess I'm just saying, I'm a recreational fisherman. I'm going to take 7 fish every time, no matter what. And I either get intercepted by the Coast Guard and say, oh, thank you very much, count my fish, I'm in compliance, or I just run to the dock. And there's a little bit of larceny in all of us, so to speak. And I don't, if I'm on a trip, do I need to call the Coast Guard before I go on a recreational trip and say that, hey, I'd like to be inspected? I just don't understand how that works. And, maybe it's not for discussion today, but it's just something that I think is, we should be aware of. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I understand your question now. Sorry about that. Thanks. So yeah, you're not calling Coast Guard to, figure out if you're inspected or not. You should know if your vessel is U.S. Coast Guard inspected. If you are inspected, your bag limit's 7 fish. If you're uninspected, your bag limit's 5 fish. And I just did want to add some additional information, just correcting myself here. I have the current regs in front of me for the recreational fishery, that it is 5 fish, or the bag limits are associated per person per trip. So it's 3 fish per person per trip, 5 and 7 per person per trip. So that 84 fish over 8 trips can be distributed on the per person basis.
Okay, thanks for that back and forth. Tony Delernia just sent me a text. He can help with the answer. So Tony, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think Matt just hit in his last statement just hit it. It's not 357 per vessel. It's 357 per fisherman on board. So you can have a private boat trip with 6 fishermen, 6-3. You can have 18 fish on the boat that trip. So again, it's not the 357 per boat. It's 357 per angler on board. And so these numbers of 8 trips, 84 fish. That's well within the parameters of what the regulations state. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony. Appreciate that added insight. I'm going to go next to Michelle Duvall. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Matt, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. So I had 2 questions. The first one was in regards to the private recreational reporting. And so, the 84 fish that you're showing on the screen, I also noticed that in the advisory panel report, someone noted that just the private vessel harvest reports from the state of Maryland were 84 fish. So is the 84 fish that you're showing on the screen, did those all come from Maryland, I guess is my question, or is the statement in the advisory panel report, indicative that not everybody is actually reporting? That's my first question.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Michelle. The latter is accurate. So again, the 84 fish that I'm reporting here is what was reported in the VTR database for the entire management unit. Again, the season was open from private reporting was open and available from August to October. So a very short time span. So I think what that advisor was indicating was that, over the course of the entire season, Maryland may have been landing more fish that weren't necessarily getting reported through this system because it kind of came out a little bit later. And again, the outreach on this is going to continue because this is the first private recreational permitting reporting of any mid-Atlantic species. Still very new, so we want to ensure we get it right. And I think Garfo understands and is on board that we need to continue doing this outreach.
Thanks for that, Matt. I appreciate it. And my second question actually has to do with the commercial season closure. And this might be a question for Mr. Pentney, but Mike, I don't know if you can tell us or have a sense of like when that trip limit trigger would have occurred. Was it just a couple weeks before the end of the year? Was it it looks like it's sometime between October and November based on what Matt is showing on the screen. I was just curious if when that might have been. I'm assuming that it probably takes you guys a week or two to get like a closure package out, or just a notice out to reduce that trip limit. But I was just curious if there was any more specificity to that. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I think the problem is, or the issue is, when the landings really picked up, kind of going into October. The season, we kind of thought was tailing off, and it turns out, it picked up pretty briskly there, beginning in November. And had we known how things were going to transpire, we probably would have imposed the 300-pound possession limit for a couple of weeks there at the end. But not knowing that, we made the wrong choice. Certainly, we'll watch it closely this year, and if things start to repeat themselves, we'll be taking that last year's performance into account.
All right, thanks, Mike, for that. Let me see who I have next on my list. Dewey, you're up. Dewey,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, is there any way, what has to be done to update the recreational size limit of the fish being caught, the average size? Because it's my belief that it's not a 3.6 pound average fish. I believe it's a lot larger than that. And so is there any dockside sampling, private recreational fishermen? Is there any dockside sampling from the VTRs of HID boats or charter boats? Or does this just stay until the next dock assessment at 3.6? Because there's clearly, I could say a lot of things, but it's clearly, we're not getting the on the ground, on the ocean of what's being caught by the recreational industry. The charter VTRs, we are, but from the recreational industry, it just ain't happening. And I know that we implemented a mandatory reporting, but maybe in 3 to 5 years it'll be up to snuff or somewhere close. But how do we update the average size? What does it take to do it? The average size fish, to update it. Thank you.
Yeah, Dewey, that's a great question. Thanks
Dewey.
for asking.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt, if you got an answer for that.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
No, please.
Yeah, Dewey, I appreciate the question, and I think this is in line with some of the conversations that you and I have had before. In terms of updating what we're assuming is the average weight, 3.65 pounds, obviously it varies up and down the coast. Some of the fish are larger in certain areas. I do think that waiting until the next assessment is going to, guarantee us something that's been reviewed properly by all the parties that are, supposed to be there. However, this is just, we're not using these total recreational landings as a solid point unless, we're really coming up to the recreational harvest limit. And as you can see, we're pretty low here. It's just an estimate that we're applying. And my hope is that private permitting and reporting is really going to increase our understanding of this fishery. Like you said, over the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to take some time. This 3.65 pounds is a good reference point for us to operate under so we can actually make these estimates, but they are just that, they are estimates. You know, I would be comfortable if this, you know, we were able to work with the SSC to review this and, you know, come up with something, but I would think that they'd be, you know, I don't want to speak for anyone, but the estimate that we have was included in the amendment, so that's what I have been operating with. But my hope is, again, that private permitting and reporting will help bolster this, and we do have an assessment on the horizon. So thanks.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yep, go ahead.
Matt, you're a lot more optimistic than I am, based on my experience with this. Way more optimistic, but that's just the cards were dealt, because it's clearly not the case when we're looking out there over the ocean and fishing beside other folks. But thank you for that.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, Dewey.
Matt's a little younger than we are, Dewey, and optimism is good at this point for Matt, for somebody like Matt. But no, I appreciate that, Matt. Yeah, thanks for your question and answer. Michelle, you still have your hand up. Did you have a follow-up?
Nope, just not paying attention. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, it's no worries. Okay, Tony Delernia, do you have a question, or was that from a previous comment?
No, I have. Thanks, Michael. I have some questions here.
Okay,
Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Building a little bit on what Dewey was saying. So I have not seen a private boat or a private boat reporting. Well, we have private boat reporting. So Matt, or can maybe somebody from the agency can answer. In the reporting, there's mandatory reporting after each trip on the private recreational trips, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Matthew, can you tell me, is there a line on that? Is it similar to like the BTRs where there's a line for the number of fish or the approximate weight of the fish?
The number of fish landed.
Number of fish landed or caught, but not a total aggregate weight.
I don't believe so, but I'd like to hear from the regional office as well, because there are a few different ways to report. So I don't know all the ins and outs of all the mechanisms.
Yeah, I'm really surprised the way you, yourself, and the folks in the regional office can be able to answer some of these questions in detail without a heads up. So perhaps they can answer it. If not, I'm not, I don't expect it, because again, some of the weeds that I'm getting down into are pretty deep. But that might help in answering Dewey's question. So whether or not there's a weight requirement there.
So Tony, just in terms of some of the requirements, it's very base level, as this is the first time that we've done this permitting and reporting. And
Understood.
I know through the development of the council's app that we've been working on, we've worked with a lot of the for hire advisors that are involved in this fishery, and the advice from them was to keep it as simple as possible. People aren't going to want to give out as much information as they have. They want to report their fish so they can be accounted for, and then over time, increase the requirements and try to evolve the program a little bit to be more and more informative over time.
I think that's a very smart strategy. Can you also tell me though, is there a did not fish? Because we've got 340 permits out on the street. Hopefully there'll be a lot more coming into this fishing season. But we only have 8 trips reported. Can you tell me, is there a did not fish line on these permits? Or are they required to submit a did not fish report?
I believe that there is.
Okay, so I guess the question then goes to the agency. If they do not report and do not file a did not fish, does the permit renew on the following year if they apply for it? I would hope that there would be some type of incentive to make them either file their trip or file did not fish. Because if they just get a permit again, then there's no incentive to file. And I see Mr. Penny has his hand up, so perhaps he can help me understand the answer to some of my questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I was going to go to Mike next. I saw his hand go up. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Tony. Well, first to your question about weight, the for hire and private rec vessel trip reports only require numbers of fish for quantity kept. It's only the commercial VTRs that require a hail weight for catch on the VTR. And in terms of a did not fish report, we haven't had a did not fish report for anyone, for hire, private or commercial, since 2015.
Okay, thank you very much. That might be something you may want to consider in the future. Again, I understand the process you have to go through and the links that you have to go through to make changes to the VTRs, but the did not fish or the weight would help us in better understanding this fishery. But again, I understand the administrative requirements and the stress on the system. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll mute myself now.
Yeah, Tony, thank you, and thanks, Mike, for.
Yeah, if I could just follow up real
Yeah,
quick
go ahead, Mike.
with
Yep,
one
go ahead.
point. I mean, so I think one of the concerns is the idea if someone doesn't complete their did not fish report, would we not renew their permit? With open access permits, as these are, that's effectively impossible to control. You know, limited access permits, moratorium permits. You know, there's a way to ensure that all the reporting is occurring, and then obviously there's a renewal period, and if they fail to renew, then they don't get their permit back. But with open access permits, that gets much more complicated. And just in general, the did not fish report, you know, we got a lot of feedback from the industry that was extremely unpopular, and effectively we removed it at industry's requests. You know, a number of years ago now. We'd certainly be, you know, could entertain a discussion with the council and interested parties on revisiting that decision. But, you know, at the time we removed it. It was an extremely unpopular measure.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Michelle Duvall, your hand's up again. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a quick point, and you know, looking quickly at the FAQs on the council's website with respect to tilefish reporting. You know, it says, "Do I need to report recreational trips where I do not target or retain any tilefish?" And so, you know, it does state that reporting is required on any recreational trips when you target or retain. So if you targeted but didn't catch anything, you still have to complete an EVTR, and you know, which is obviously different than a do not fish report. You know, but it's probably, if you're targeting something and you don't catch it, you might not be inclined to report it. I don't know. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the challenges. I don't know what our messaging has been, and maybe I can ask Chris or Mary, or I hate to put you guys on the spot, but maybe even Matt, kind of what's the messaging that's been put out on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Matt and Mary can best address that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
And so in terms of messaging, you know, the sorts of requirements and press releases, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, just, you know, with this issue of a targeted trip that you're without catch, has that been identified as something that's part of our messaging? I guess that's my question, because I'm not up to speed on all the messaging that's gone out regarding these, you know, the reporting requirements.
Yeah, so I can speak to it in terms of what Michelle was talking about there. You know, if you're going out and you're targeting but you don't catch, that was part of the requirements, was to note, you know,
Okay.
we were going out, we didn't land any fish, and obviously Mary put together the FAQs with myself and a contractor, and just tried to be as clear as possible there to supplement any information. I don't know if Mary has anything to add, but yeah.
Nothing too significant. I mean, we've done several announcements on our website and via email about various aspects of reporting, and that is something that we've highlighted. I mean, I think, you know, there is certainly a risk of people. You can't be guaranteed that every person that targets Blueline Tilefish is accurately reporting, but we have certainly done our best to communicate that requirement via our website and emails and the FAQs.
Okay, that's good to know. And I wasn't suggesting that you hadn't done everything, that you guys are top notch, and I assumed that that information was out to, to folks fishing. But I just wanted to put that on the record. Dewey, I've got you up next. You got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given that this is a GARFO permit and the folks are possessing it, do they have to report everything else they catch? Even if it's not Blueline Tilefish?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll turn to Garfo or staff if somebody wants to chime in, just jump in.
Just give me a second. I'm looking up the reg.
Okay. You don't know all the regs off the top of your head, Mike?
Surprisingly, no.
Yeah, take your time. I can, do you want me to come back to you? I can maybe take a question from the public and then come back if it gives you a little time. I don't want to. I don't want you to rush through it. Let's do that. So you take your time. We'll find the information in the reg. Is there anyone else from the council that has any questions or wants to make any comments regarding this agenda topic before I go to the public? Okay, I don't see any hands coming up. So let's go to Mr. Fletcher. Go ahead, James.
Is it a question for, I guess, for Noah? Is it illegal for a person to sell, a recreational fisherman to sell Blueline tile? Is that a federal violation or a state violation? Because some states don't make it illegal to sell recreational catch. And from personal observation, and you will say it's anecdotal information, there are a whole lot more fish coming in and being sold under the so-called recreational fisheries. Someone needs to go up the eastern shore of Virginia and Maryland and look. But that's anecdotal information, and I know, but my question is it a federal violation or a state violation for recreational fishermen to sell the catch?
Yeah,
I can't speak to whether it's a state violation or not. I can again, I'll look at the regs and see what I can find out on the federal violation side. While I have the mic, on the vessel, on the private angler reporting, it's only count of individual golden and Blueline tilefish landed or discarded is what's required.
Yeah, and James, I'll tell you that in Maryland, it is a state violation for recreational fish to be sold. So if that's happening, it is a state violation, but I don't know on the federal side, how that works. Mike, were you able to find what you were looking for, or do you need a little more time? Because we can come back to it. It's not a problem. So I don't see. I see Chris Moore's hands up. Go ahead, Chris. Did you have something, Chris? If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Mr.
There you go.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, in regard to the private rec reporting requirements, I think everyone knows that based on Matt's presentation today, that they haven't been in place that long. But we do plan on providing the council with an update report on the performance of that particular requirement. I can't remember, Matt, if we scheduled that for October or August, maybe it's even December. Do you remember?
I believe it was, I don't think it's August. It was October or December. And I was, in touch with the Garfield lead on that, and we're still trying to get solid confirmation, but I don't think it's August.
So that'll give us a better idea of how this requirement has performed, and certainly give us some additional insight into the entire program. Again, it's important to us because it's the first one that we've done in the Mid-Atlantic. So we're really, at least from a staff perspective, really curious as to how many people are actually using the apps. Are they having any problems? How many fish do they catch? All of that. So look forward to that probably in October.
Okay.
It is October. I can clarify. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Okay, so I don't see any other hands. What I'd like to do, I'm looking at my notes here, and Matt, so under the specifications, I think you've prepared a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Do you want me to pull that on the screen?
Yeah, I think we can probably get to that and then see if we can pass that motion.
And just, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, the motion doesn't include these recommendations that came from the monitoring committee in terms of accountability measures not being triggered and the commercial port side samplers. I don't know exactly what would be allowed, through the process with the regional office about AMs involved in a motion. Or this biological sampling. I just wanted to draw it to your attention again that this is part of, a subset of the recommendation if people want just to keep that in mind. So,
okay.
Thanks for that. And let me get up the actual motion for you here.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the screen. Matt prepared a motion for the council, and I'm going to ask at this time if anybody would like to make that motion. If you want to put your hand up to make the motion, we can do that. Okay, so I see Dewey's hand up. Dewey, are you going to make that motion?
Yes.
Okay. And a second from Peter Hughes.
Yes.
Any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Dewey, did you want to speak to the motion?
Well, it is what it is, so that's all I can say. Thank you.
I got you. Right. Okay. Let me see. Anybody else have anything they want to? Peter, did you want to speak to the motion?
No, I think Dewey captured it all.
Okay, good. Okay. And so Matt, would you expect a follow-up motion to this? Or does this take care of the specs process? I'm trying to figure out what the next steps
takes
are.
care of, sorry, getting some
No, go ahead.
interruption there. I apologize. This definitely takes care of the specifications. I just wanted to note, again, the recommendations that came out of the monitoring committee. I don't know if we actually have the ability to move that AMs not be triggered or that, a recommendation for port side samplers occurs. I just wanted to, one last time put that in front of the council, just for their consideration.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take up this motion at this time, and then we'll see if anybody wants to make an additional motion. Anyone from the council want to comment on this? Peter defer. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at, I don't know that we ever got the answer to both of Dewey's questions about the average fish size of, 3 and something pounds. I'm not sure where that number comes from in the first place. So, because if that's an average, somebody's catching 1 pound blue line tilefish. So where's the number come from, Matt?
So that's in Amendment 6 of the Tilefish FMP. That's the amendment that added blue line tilefish to the plan. I believe that average number comes from sampling that occurred out of Old Dominion University. I'm not 100% positive of that, but I can get that information fairly quickly. But I do know, as you said, there are small blue line tilefish that, go into that average. So we do see some of those smaller fish. That's what's been reported. That's what's in the amendment. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Peter. Anyone else from the council have any comment on the motion? Is there anyone from the public that wants to make comment on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to read the motion and call the question. Move that the blue line tilefish ABC equals 100,520 pounds for the 2022 to 2024 fishing years with status quo management measures. This results in a status quo ACLs of 73,380 pounds and 27,140 pounds for the recreational and commercial sectors, respectively. Is there any opposition to the motion? If there's opposition, please raise your hand. Are there any abstentions to the motion? Okay, seeing none, motion carries by unanimous consent with no abstention. So I think Matt, I mean, you can tell me, but I think we covered what we needed to, right, for this item on the agenda.
Yeah, that definitely covers the agenda item. And just to add to Mr. Defer's last comment, I have in front of me, it's a 3.65 pounds per fish was used for recreationally caught fish. It's primarily based on data collected by Old Dominion University via donations of carcasses from recreational anglers through the VMRC's Marine Sports Fish Collection Program, as well as head boats and charter boats from Virginia.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and I'll also ask Mike if you were able to find the regulations and maybe get back to the question that was posed earlier. Were you able to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So on the sale of fish by private recreational vessels, yes, it would be a violation. The regulation citation for those of you who are interested is 648.4.12, which is tilefish vessels, and then subpart 3, which pertains to private recreational vessel permits. And it says such vessel must observe the recreational possession limits as specified at, and it gives the citation for that, and the prohibition on sale.
Okay. Thanks, Mike, for that. Does anyone have anything they'd like to offer? Let me go out to the public. Laurie Nolan, it's funny to see your name, but go ahead.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Nice to hear everyone's voices. Be nicer to see everyone's faces, but we can't do that yet. But really nice to hear everyone's voices. I just had 2 comments, I guess. I don't know if we need to try to get council support, or, I mean, the one issue, as Dewey brought up, like, okay, the 3.6, it came from somewhere, not just as where it came from. But I wonder if the council wouldn't want to make a recommendation on the reporting requirements for the recreational sector to in fact add a box, a section where you're entering, you know, the approximate weights of these fish. I get it that, you know, it's a new program, less is better to start with, but just to sort of flag that as a way to perhaps down the road adjust what the average weight is on these fish. I don't know where we're going to go with that. And there was another bullet that mentioned more shoreside sampling of the blue lines that are caught incidentally by the golden tilefish fleet. And I don't know if that takes any council action or a recommendation. As everyone knows, the golden tilefish fleet is a small fleet. And the idea was that if they encounter, the trigger was going to be 100 pounds. So if a golden tilefish trip has caught 100 pounds of blue lines, we, the industry, would notify the observer program, the sampling program, not the observer program, sorry, the shoreside sampling program, in order to get them down on the dock to actually sample those blue lines to try to supply some more biological information on these fish, which we have nothing on. So again, don't know if there's any council action needed, but just wanted to give a little background on the shoreside sampling side of it, and just question, how are we going to adjust the recreational average size fish if we don't make an attempt to collect that information?
Okay, Laura, I appreciate that. I don't know if that's a question for Chris or Mike. I don't know how that would happen. Chris Moore, I see your hand. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Lori. So we're going to have, as I indicated earlier, we're going to have a report on private rec reporting requirements in October. And I think at that point, that would be the best point to introduce an idea of either measuring fish maybe, or either in terms of length or weight, or some other things that we might want to add to the reporting requirements. But I would suggest that the fact that we have a private rec reporting system in place, and actually folks are actually using it, and we have a count of fish, is a major plus. And I wouldn't want to change anything at this point until we have, you know, that report in October. But I think Lori brings up a good point. As time goes on and we figure out that in fact the reporting requirements are working and people are doing it, then maybe we add some additional questions that folks would have to answer. But I think we wait till October.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Peter Defer.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for that, Chris. And so let me get this straight. So that would be an action that we would initiate and say we want to see some sort of additional box on the reporting requirements that gives us weight or length or both or some other data. And then GARFO is actually the implementation of that recommendation, but they have to approve it first. So is that what you're saying is the process?
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's the process.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, guys. Is there anyone else that has anything they want to add to this agenda topic? Michelle Duvall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to speak to Lori's point about the biological sampling. I don't know. I mean, I think all of us probably support the monitoring committee recommendation, you know, to improve biological sampling. You know, more is almost always better. You know, I don't know if that requires a motion or you know, simply the you know, the sense of the council that, you know, we would encourage that kind of coordination between, you know, the fleet and the commercial port samplers, you know, just to provide additional information. I think similar types of informal attempts to improve biological sampling, have occurred in other places. But because Lori brought it up, I also wanted to express my support for that. I think it's, if we could make that happen, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to ask Chris or Matt. Maybe Chris, do we need a motion for something like that?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I think we've had a good, I think folks understand what we're talking about. We know
Yeah.
that we have things in play, like, again, we're going to be looking at the private rec reporting stuff in October. Certainly, Garpo's on the call today. They've heard, our interest in collecting additional biological information from the commercial side as well. So I don't think a motion's necessary.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I can ask the council, is there any objection to the support of that concept in moving forward based on the discussion? And seeing none, I don't see any hands. I see, Chris, your hand's still up, and Laura, your hand's still up. So Laura, did you have something? Did you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just
No, it's
wanted
okay.
to let everyone realize that the portside sampling program has been reduced funding by 50%. So normally, all the trips pretty much were sampled as far as the golden tilefish go. So those blue lines that we encounter would have been sampled anyway. But because this program has been reduced in funding by 50%, this was just a way to try to more effectively gather those blue lines that occur when they occur, because they don't always occur. So it was just a way of trying to be more effective with half the money, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that information, Laurie. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, my hand raising function isn't working today.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
Dan, go ahead. Yep. Your hand's not up, but go, please.
Yeah, if I may, I'm gonna have to reboot. I signed on through the browser. I had trouble with the
Yeah,
app.
sometimes the browser can be, it's better if you have the app. I was having terrible trouble this morning again. But I was able to figure it out. So, but please, go for it. Go ahead.
Break. I'm gonna sign off and sign on through the app.
Yeah, we're gonna take a break as soon as we're done with this.
Okay,
with this item.
short. It's a really the golden tilefish fishery is extremely small, as everybody knows, and I'm sure most, or if not all, the participants would be fine with calling up the sampling center. Maybe what would be needed would just be a letter sent to the golden tilefish permit holders, giving the information, explaining the need for it, and giving the right phone numbers out to make it easier for the fishermen to call in when they have over 100 pounds of blue lines. Might be the way to go with that.
Okay.
Let us know when we should make the phone call.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's something that I think staff we can take that into consideration, and we'll see how it goes from, but I appreciate that comment.
Yep. Very good. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. And so if if you're not able to get your hand raise function working, what I'll try to do is I'll ask after, or you just send me a text or something, and I can call on you. I think you have my cell phone number, or hopefully you do. Okay, Matt, based on the comments and discussion, is there anything else that you need from us at this point from the council?
No, I think we're good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time spent and the work that you put into all of this. Let's take a little bit of a break. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10. I've got 10:05 on my screen. Let's come back at 10:15, and we'll take up golden tilefish. So I'm going to go on mute, and I'll be back at 10:15. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move into our next item on the agenda. We're going to talk about golden tilefish multi-year specifications framework, meeting 1. And I'm going to turn it over to Jose for the presentation. Go ahead, Jose.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I apologize for the technical difficulties, but just for your information, yesterday we tested the system with Mary and Stephen, and everything was working fine. So I have no idea what happened, but I'm glad that it's working well now.
Don't feel like you need to apologize. It is what it is. There's no apology needed. But we've got you on. We've got you up and ready. And yeah, if you can take us through your presentation, that'd be great.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the Tilefish multi-year specifications framework, and this is the first meeting for the development of this framework. And basically, what you're going to be doing today is to review the range of alternatives in that document, in that framework document, and if possible, select preferred alternative. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how we came about the development of this framework. Last year at the October Council meeting, you met to discuss Executive Order on Promoting American Seafood Competitiveness and Economic Growth, EO 13921. Section 4 of that EO requires each regional fishery management council to submit to the Secretary of Commerce a prioritized list of recommended actions to reduce burdens on domestic fishing and to increase production within sustainable fisheries. At that time, the Council approved 18 recommendations covering a broad range of topics. Regarding golden tilefish, the recommendation that was made was to initiate a framework to allow golden tilefish specifications to be set for more than 3 years. That specific recommendation was then folded into the 2021 Council proposed actions and deliverables. And the specific language there is to initiate golden tilefish multi-year specifications framework to address that executive order. So what are we doing with this framework? What's in it? Basically, we're considering measures to revise the specification process. The considerations that are being made are just minor modifications to the management system, and they're all process-related items. The first one is the duration for setting multi-year management measures, and the second one is the timing of the fishing year. In addition, we're going to use this framework to set specifications for 2023 and 2024. So regarding the first issue, multi-year specifications, currently golden tilefish management specifications can be set for up to 3 years. Excuse me. This framework will allow the Council to modify the process to simply change the number of years or the time period for which those measures could be set, so they can match the Northeast Regional Coordinating Council stock assessment schedule. Under this specific issue, we have two alternatives. Alternative 1 in section 5.1.1 is the no action status quo. So as I said before, under the current process, golden tilefish specifications can be set for up to 3 years. So under alternative 1, there will be no change to that process. Under alternative 2, in section 5.12, the specifications to be set for a maximum number of years needed to be consistent with the Northeast Regional Coordinating Council approved stock assessment schedule. Now, the language that you see here under alternative 2 is the same language that was used when we changed the multi-year specifications for surf clams and ocean quahog. We used exactly the same language. Now, currently, the golden tilefish assessments are conducted every 3 years. However, we're anticipating that in the future, This could change to every 4 or 5 years. So when this happens, if you were to select alternative 2, we will have a system in place to benefit from that change. Alternative 2 will provide additional flexibility as the specifications could be set to cover the time period until a new golden tilefish assessment is produced. So none of the multi-year specifications alternative are expected to impact the prosecution of golden tilefish, of the golden tilefish fishery. It's not expected to affect landings level, distribution of fishing effort, or the methods and practice that are currently used in the fishery. This table shows an overall qualitative summary of the expected impacts of the current conditions on the value ecosystem components, or VECs. And you can see that there are no impacts, direct or indirect impacts, under any of the alternatives. Although there are not impacts on the VECs under Alternative 2, it is possible that some administrative efficiencies will be realized by reducing the need to create and implement multiple specification documents to set management measures for fisheries between stock assessments. So this will, we're expecting that this will improve the management process, the efficient use of council and NOAA staff time. It is also possible that this could in turn decrease the administrative burden and the IFQ cost recovery fish in the future. 18 members indicated that they support the development of this framework document, and they support this Alternative 2. 18 members have reiterated in the past that specifying management measures for a time period consistent with the stock assessment schedules and potentially longer than 3 years will provide stability in the fishery. The second issue is fishing year timing. Currently, the fishing year for this fishery is November 1 through October 31st. So under this framework, the council will have an opportunity to modify the process to simply change the fishing year timing, how that timing is set. Now, we're including this issue in this framework document to address a recommendation that came out of that 5-year review of the golden tilefish IFQ program that was conducted back in September of 2017. And that recommendation specifically indicated that it will be good to match the fishing year with the calendar year to improve the way the cost recovery is calculated in the fishery. And I will talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. So under this issue, we have two alternatives. Alternative 1, 5.21, no action status quo. So the fishing year will continue to be November 1 through October 31st of the following year. Under Alternative 2, which is section 5.22, actually in the document I mistakenly called them both 5.21, but Alternative 2 is 5.22. The golden tilefish fishing year is the 12-month period beginning with January 1st annually. Therefore, under Alternative 2, the end result is that the fishing year will be January 1st through December 31st. So there are a couple of things here that will occur if you were to change the fishing year, if you were to make the fishing year the same as the calendar year. The first thing that we'll see here is that the fishing year will match the cost recovery calculations. GARFO uses the fishing year to monitor the use of the IFQ allocation. So when GARFO is doing, all their accounting process of how much IFQ has been used, transfers and things like that, they do that using the fishing year, which is November 1 through October 31st. However, when GARFO calculates the cost associated with the management of the IFQ program, the IFQ fishery, they use a calendar year. So those two things are not matching. This discrepancy at times has caused difficulties in the administration of the cost recovery program, as the cost recovery year traverses two fishing years and vice versa. So to ease the administration of the cost recovery in the golden tilefish fishery, unifying the allocation, usage, monitoring, and the cost recovery time period to a single 12-month cycle period will help. In addition, as you see there, this will also match the stock assessment results projections which are based on a calendar year. So the calendar year is also strongly recommended, as this is the time period upon which stock assessments are based. So, for example, right now, let's say that when we make projections for 2021, those projections, when they come out of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, those projections are based from January 1st through December 31st. But when we start the fishing year, we're starting that fishing year November 1st of the prior year. So those two things are not matching either. Now, none of the fishing year timing alternatives are expected to impact the prosecution of the golden tilefish fishery, including landings levels, distribution of fishing effort, or fishing methods and practices. Here I have another table showing the impacts on the value ecosystem components. Alternative 1 has no direct impact or indirect impact on any of those beds. Alternative 2 has no direct or indirect impact on the physical habitat and protected species either. Now, as I indicated before, Alternative 2 will result in the 12-month quota specification cycle to be aligned with the 12-month cycle for which stock projections are made. And we're expecting that this will potentially reduce uncertainty in the long term. And that's why you see impacts ranging from no impacts to a slightly positive to the biological component. Alternative 2 could in turn decrease administrative burdens of the IFQ administrative costs recovered from the industry, as I indicated before, and this is expected to result in impacts to the human communities that range from no impacts to slightly positive when compared to current conditions. Now, advisory panel members have indicated that they support Alternative 2 as well. The industry feels that ending the fishing year in December rather than October will create more stability in harvesting their full allocation. And what they mean by this is that sometimes October can be a very stormy month with fish on the move in response to weather conditions, and sometimes they're not able to land their whole allocation if the weather in the month of October is bad. The third issue that we're going to be addressing the council will be addressing in this framework will be the setting of specifications for 2023 and 2024. So last year, the council set specifications for a two-year multi-specification cycle, 2021 and 2022. So currently, we're in the first year of that two-year multi-year specifications cycle. And typically, we set or review specifications early in the spring, just like you did for Blueline tilefish earlier today. But this year, there's a slight change in the timing to conduct the specifications process for golden tilefish. And so this year, things are slightly different due to the new stock assessment schedule implemented by the NRCC. And basically, this year, we're getting a management track assessment update, but that will not be conducted until June of 2021. June of this year. So we're going to be use the results from that assessment update to do two things. Number one is to review the 2022 specifications that you already approved last year, and also to set specifications for 2023 and 2024. And down the road, we're going to have a research track stock assessment in June of 2024 to set specifications for 2025, 26, and 27. So the only thing here that is changing really is just the timing of when we're doing things. Everything else is going to be the same. Once we get the updated stock assessment, that information is going to be it's going to go through the SSC. That information is going to go through the monitoring committee, and we'll have recommendations from the SSC monitoring committee and staff, and all those recommendations will be presented to the council at the August 2021 meeting. So the process, what we do in the process is not changing. We're going to do the same thing that we have done in prior years. It's just the timing. Now, excuse me, if the council were to select alternative to 5.22, which changes the fishing year, we will have to make a modification to the 2022 specifications, more specifically to the fishing year for those specifications. Currently, that specification, the fishing year for 2022 is November 1 of 2021 through October 31st of 2022. So we're going to have to make a one-time only adjustment, and we're going to call the 2022 fishing year the time period from November 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022. So that fishing year will be a 14-month fishing year. Again, this is a one-time adjustment only to facilitate that transition if you were to change the fishing year. Now, when we meet again after we get the stock assessment update, and we meet again to review the specifications portion of this framework, I will have specific numerical values for you to see how this will work. Then for 2023 and 2024, we'll just set specifications on a calendar year, as you see there, as you see in this slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I have not changed the slide. I apologize for that again. So basically, I'm going to go through this quickly. To facilitate that transition, we're going to have to make a one-time adjustment only. And so we're going to call we will have to call the 2022 fishing year the time period from November 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022, one-time only adjustment. And I will have values and numerical values about how this will be done when we meet again on the second framework meeting. So here's how how this document is being developed. We had a AP meeting in February 2021 where we presented this information to the AP members, and they're supporting the development of this framework. Today, the council is going to review and hopefully select preferred alternative for those two issues. This is the first framework meeting, and selecting alternative now will greatly benefit staff in the further development of the document. Specifically, if you do go ahead and select the change of the fishing year as a preferred alternative, because then it will be easier for us to calculate all those numerical values down the road. Then we're going to have a second meeting that is going to be in August of 2021. And at that meeting, the council will complete the selection of preferred alternative. And basically what you're going to be doing there is selecting preferred alternative for the specifications component of the document, and then approve the whole document as a whole. And then staff will finalize the EA and submit the document to the National Marine Fisheries Service around September of this year. And the final rule hopefully will be published between late 2021 and early 2022. And actually that concludes my brief presentation, Mr. Chairman. So if there are any questions, I can address them now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jose. I appreciate your presentation. Let me ask if anybody has any, does anyone have any questions for Jose? I know that you've prepared some motions in order to identify preferred alternatives, which you just mentioned would be beneficial and helpful for staff to, further develop this framework. Let me see if anybody has any questions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said that's correct. Yes, and I have them here if you want to look at them. Yes.
Yeah. I've got them in my notes. Let me see if anybody has any questions, at least regarding the presentation, and then we can go to motions. But thanks for your presentation. Anyone have any questions or any comments for Jose? Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jose, you may have said this, but I missed it. Why did we have a fishing year that started in November in the first place?
No, I did not mention that, but the fishing year started in November in the first place because that was an agreement between council staff and GARFO, and I think that it was done as a way not to send too many packages to GARFO at the same time. So this was something that was done on purpose way back when the FMP was first implemented. Because the way things were working back then. Now, I have consulted with GARFO staff, and we don't think that that's an issue any longer. And we think that changing the fishing year is not going to create any administrative issues.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. That was going to be the question I was going to ask Mike regarding, his staff and the change in timing, whether or not that was going to put a stress on his staff. But if you've already spoken with them, then that works. I mean, I don't know if Mike, if you want to weigh in or add into this discussion on how your staff would adjust to a change in the timing of the specs setting. Okay. All right, I don't hear anything. Does anyone else have any questions? Is there anyone from the public that would like to ask any questions or of Jose? Okay, seeing none. Jose, oh, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Laurie. Laurie Nolan, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. I guess I'm just going to make a comment of support of this change in the timing of the fishing year. When we went through the AP meeting, as Jose said, and Jose, I think you've done a really great job on capturing all parts of this framework. Everyone is on board. Nobody had a problem with it. And the answer to Chris's question, that was the November 1 start was just for simplicity of another spec package, not landing on GARFO's desk for a January 1 start. So it's really not a problem. And the industry and the AP that was involved in this was completely supportive of it. On the multi-year specs, that too, this fishery operated 10, 11 years under this constant harvest strategy, which was terrific. It brought good results in the rebuilding of the stock. So, everyone has always asked for this consistency and knowing your future. So the constant harvest strategy and the multi-year specification being stretched out more than 3 years is a really great thing, I think, for the industry and also for the stock biologically. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. I appreciate those comments. Let me bring up my screen again here. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to add to any comments? Is there anyone else from the council? Okay, so at this time, I guess, Jose, I know you prepared a couple motions. I think
can
we
you
can
see
probably,
the motion that is on the screen? Can you see the motions on the screen right now?
I don't see the motions on the screen right now. I have them in my notes.
Okay, 1 second. One
Yeah.
second. Actually, I'm gonna. Can you see this now? I had a Word document, but somehow I'm just gonna use
It's
this
okay.
document.
Yeah, just take your time. We'll get it figured out.
So here's the first motion.
So Jose, it looks like you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. Lord, okay. How's that now? That's not working either?
No.
Oh boy. Hey, Mary.
Yes.
Somehow my screen is dead. It's not sharing any longer. I sent you the motions by in a text document. Is it possible for you to bring that up?
When did you send those to me?
Can you see this now?
No, we're not seeing anything.
Yeah. Well, I can either send you an email or I apologize. I don't know why I'm having just horrible time with this my system.
So Mary, in the document that you sent me,
I've got
we
the
have
motions. I can pull it up. Just give me one second.
Yeah, take your time. We're way ahead of schedule, so it's totally fine. It's no worries.
Okay. So I have
Thank
up
you,
here
Mary.
what Jose sent me. Jose, does this look right?
Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just comparing it to what I have in my notes to make sure it's, yeah, that looks good. So I guess we need to take up both of these motions in we need to take them up independently. And given the presentation from Jose, I guess what I'd ask of the council, is there anyone that would like to make this motion? What I'd ask is that you read it into the record, and then I'll ask for a second based on the presentation from Jose. Dan Farnham, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should I read each motion individually, or you want them all at once?
Well, let's do one at a time. We'll do the first one, and then we'll move into the second one. But if you want to read the first motion into the record, and then I'll ask for a second, and then we'll take a vote and then go from there. And if you wanted to do both, that'd be great.
Okay, yep, sure, will do. I move that in section 5.1, move alternative 5.1.2, alternative 2, specifications to be set for a maximum of number of years needed to be consistent with the Northeast Regional Coordinating Council approved stock assessment schedule as the preferred alternative.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So we've got a motion made by Dan Farnham. Is there a second to that motion? Does somebody want to second the motion? If you can raise your hand, I'll. Okay, Tony DeLernia is going to second that motion. Discussion on the motion? Tony, did you want to add anything? Your hand's still up.
No, it's pretty obvious what we should do here. This is pretty simple. It's consistent with the NRCC's the recommendations. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone from the public that wants to weigh in on this motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Is there any opposition to the motion? If you're opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. Seeing no opposition, are there any abstentions to the motion? Okay, seeing no abstentions, the motion carries by consent with no abstention. And so, Dan, if it works for you, if you're willing to make the next motion, I'll go back to you and we can do this.
Yeah,
again.
that'll be fine, Mr. Chairman, sure. I move that in section 5.2, move alternative 5.2.2, alternative 2, the golden tilefish fishing year is a 12-month period beginning with January 1st annually as the preferred alternative.
Okay, thanks, Dan, for making that motion. Tony, do you want to second this one as well?
So moved.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we've got a motion by Dan Farnham, seconded by Tony DeLernia. Let me see if there's any discussion of the motion. Does anyone have anything they want to ask questions about or any comments? Is there anyone from the public that would like to provide any comment or have any questions regarding the motion? Okay, seeing none. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing no opposition, I'll give it another second here, but seeing no opposition, the motion carries by consent with no opposition. Are there any abstentions to this motion? Okay, motion carries by consent with no abstention. All right. Well, that takes us through this item on the agenda. Jose, is there anything else that needs to come before the council at this point?
No, that's it for today. Thank you.
So we're good. Yeah, well, thanks for your presentation, and thank you. I know we had a few challenges with the technology, but it seemed to work out fine. And so what I'd like to do, we're ahead of schedule, but our next presenter is Paul Doremus, who's the acting AA, and I'm sure that his schedule is pretty tight, given his new role, serving in that role. So what I think what might be best is if we just take a break. I could ask Chris if he's got other thoughts, but I think we should just probably take. I don't want to put Paul on the spot and have him. If I'm sure he's super busy. So maybe we should just stick to the 1 o'clock. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree.
Just stick to 1 o'clock and we'll just take a break for 2 hours.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's do that. So we're going to take a break right now, and that way, Paul, we're not going to mess up his schedule. And I'm looking forward to the afternoon session. So we're going to break now. Jose, thank you for your presentation, and thank you everyone for your participation in the meeting. We'll take a break till 1 o'clock.
Question,
We'll come back
Mike.
at 1 o'clock.
Mike, this
Yep.
is Peter.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
For I